going? A few times I've caught lightning in a bottle, and a few times I've puzzled endlessly over something that I fell in love with and have gone to the ends of the earth to get better at. Lots of games though don't really get that treatment. In fact, a lot of experiences are usually tried out, maybe finished, and then I just move on once I've had my fill of them. It's very hard to know if the feeling of returning will occur in a game because it generates not just from your sense of enjoyment towards the product in question, but it's also a matter of chemistry too. I've compared many of the titles I've consumed to some of my absolute favorites, and a few buzzwords have flown across my ears like impact, zen state, smiles, excitement, and a few more that may come back to me. When I think of Titanfall 2 or Doom Eternal, the Black Box Need for Speed titles, Ultra Kill, Minecraft, Skyrim, the Rockstar and From Software titles, I always return to them like a lost father who has a lot of explaining to do in regards to why he's been gone for so long. Well, for me, I found another title that has not only brought upon that obsessive feeling once more, but has also made me appreciate why I enjoy extreme sports games so much. This is Street Uni X, or SUX for short. Now, in order to understand just how much this game stood out for me, we have to go back to the root of it all, which means a lot of yapping for a bit. And that is in the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series. You see, the PS1 and the PS2 had nothing but black magic in the realm of extreme sports games. Pick your poison, pick your ride of choice, and you were more than likely to find it. Playing as some of the most talented athletes of that generation, with some of the most well-curated soundtracks ever done in a video game that truly understood the assignment in regards to bringing the cultures to life and bringing nostalgic and euphoric experiences together. I've done a video on the topic of extreme sports before, but I'm going to talk about it again here. So in a lot of genres, there's always a source of adrenaline and excitement that we look for in games. In shooters, it's often supported by the display of violence and all of the bloody and gory details surrounding it, but it's not the only way to experience a thrill. In fact, extreme sports games are nearly unmatched in the display of psychological rushes that one can experience because of how much in the moment that these activities can really be. From the most commonplace sports to the most fatal ones, they all exhibit a level of intensity and being that is close to the edge that can also be emulated without the need to ever pick up a gun. Street Uni X presents a community of riders that use unicycles, which are one-wheeled vehicles that can be used for short commuting or trick styling. Street Uni X basically rips out the guts of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater and replaces the skateboard with a unicycle and sprinkles them with PS1 style graphics. So what ended up happening is that the people behind this, including the developer, PS1'd all over the Unity engine and brought about legit one of the most underrated indie titles that I've played that came out in 2024. I was very quickly impressed with how well it gelled together. Playing this game brought me back to the days of barely playing Pro Skater and Dave Mirra's BMX freestyle back in the 2000s, as well as Underground and American Wasteland. And what I remembered from those days too was just how insanely fun they were. I was never very good at them and I didn't play them a whole lot, but they were a lot of fun in ways that I didn't experience in a lot of other games at the time. And this is coming from someone that wasn't really into skateboarding as a kid like my brother was. My closest experiences with extreme sports, if you could say that, was on the scooter and the BMX. And what I mean is by riding around a lot and not really trick styling or riding off of buildings or anything like that, where I just rode around casually rather than just styling on anyone else. However, the Tony Hawk's games, as well as Dave Mirra's Freestyle BMX 2, showed me a digital glimpse of, pulling off some of the most insane combos that you could think of, even if it wasn't entirely realistic. And not that it ever really mattered to me as a kid, because these games were awesome enough to make other kids pick up a skateboard or a BMX or a snowboard anyways. Street Uni X goes for that natural desire to improve in the same way that the Pro Skater titles did. Every time you messed up a combo chain and lost all of your points, you would seethe and abuse the reset button when you didn't hit your marks like I did in this game. Hence why I titled the shortcut Reset Button Simulator. But in any event, extreme sports games in general are skill-based. Having an emphasis on a short range of challenging but polished content with comprehensible control schemes and fun mechanics to use and master, rather than an overload of content that we have nowadays, where we're in an industry where content sells, where the more content you have, the more engaged your audience can be. Some of the more modern extreme sports games, though, have been able to strike a balance where some have modding and others have a live server structure that guarantees future content. But Street Uni X opts for literally a handful of maps, all with challenges to overcome for each rider, where all of the goals are pretty much the same across each rider. The goal is pretty simple. You pick a rider of choice, go for all of the goals on the map, rinse and repeat until you have completed all of the goals, and then with each completion, you unlock a new rider, and you keep going until you unlock all of the riders. Some people might feel like that they're being given a salad instead of a full platter in terms of the content pool, but like I already said, Street Uni X is every bit a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater clone, but with a unicycle instead. And also, in case you're quick to forget, the early Tony Hawk's games didn't have a lot of content either, but were designed and structured in a way to incentivize repeatable runs where you could grind for goals and for points. The rest came down to mastery of the array of tricks and moves that you could pull off. The difference between a first-time player and either a speedrunner or a high-scoring player is night and day. I recently booted up Pro Skater 1, and yeah, I have a lot of work to do in terms of my skill, but when you look at this footage and contrast it with, say, another player who has played it way more than I have, you can immediately see the seamless and snappy transitions between the inputs and the moves being performed with accurate and quick succession. This shows what is possible when you can put in hundreds, if not thousands of hours into a game. The difference is just simply night and day. And when you put in those hours of practice alongside religious analysis, you can perform a lot of these insane feats too. When I first went through Street Uni X with the first character I selected, I took what felt like forever to finally score 250,000 points on the last map. But after some practicing with other characters and coming up with a sequence of tricks that could help me reach the goal quicker, it became easier as a result, and that was just due to concentration, determination, and practice, which is something that this game's loop encourages. Basically, there's not much content, but there is a lot of replayability. Plenty of unique opportunities to create formulas for insane tricks and precise movements, paving the way for seamless and zen-like gameplay down the track. This game was developed by a person named Daffodil, alongside other people that helped in other departments regarding the licensing of music, programming, art, and levels. Daffodil's one-wheeled mission was to deliver an extreme sports experience representing the unicycle community. I've looked around and there's really nothing else like it out there. Or at the very least, no unicycle extreme sports games in the same spirit as to what you saw on the PS1 and the PS2. Other unicycling games do exist, but they are in different types of genres and aren't trying to be like those games that I just mentioned before in the extreme sports realm, and not necessarily what the developer was looking for in the first place. So as a result, the person had kickstarted the project for Street Uni X, or Sucks for short, and began coasting their way into the Unity codebase, sprinkling some vertex snapping, texture mapping, and dithering in a retro fashion. And as a result, we got an amalgamation of the Pro Skater games, 1 to 3 I'm blindly assuming, and give the player a unicycle to style with. I mentioned the term lightning in a bottle and had thought of a few games that flew their way into the empty bottle. This game is one of them, and honestly, it's disgusting just how underrated this game really is. Because while it does wear Pro Skater's shoes to the T along with its own variables, it is incredibly authentic in its aesthetics, its complete respect and understanding and devotion to the culture that it represents, and its personal mission to bring unicycling forward into the extreme sports gaming realm. What extreme sports also does really well too is help transcend an activity that isn't necessarily liked by everyone into a universal desire, and that is to have fun, to make something that not everyone necessarily likes, but make it into something that is still fun anyways, and to deliver it in a digital sphere without the physical repercussions that can take place in these activities. And that not a lot of games can do this either. Just for an off-topic example, I recently started playing Balatro. It's a card game where it takes the idea of poker, but then adds a lot of twists and turns into it. And while I have said in the past that I did finally get into card games, I'm still not overly crazy about them. But games like Balatro and Slay the Spire have transcended their own genres for me, where I was still able to have fun with them regardless of the fact that they were card games. And that is a very, very difficult thing to do. And for me, Street Uni X is something that has given me the idea of maybe pursuing unicycling in the future. I don't know if I'll like it, but what I do know for certain is that this game is a lot of fun. And even if you never really get into BMX or snowboarding or skateboarding or whatever, or even parkouring or any type of extreme sports you can think of, these games have the means and the opportunity to provide a fun and engaging experience regardless of your avoidance of the activity in real life. And the thing is, I don't really know a lot about unicycles. I barely know anything about them at all. But like I already just said earlier, playing this game has made me entertain the idea of using one in the future perhaps. And that's also another part of what makes the game fantastic too, is that on top of what I've already said, this game has an accessible and easy framework that invites a player into the world of unicycling within the game space with a simple control scheme that isn't making you input a sea of buttons like in Tekken, but 2 buttons with different types of tricks. Foot padding to help keep combos multiplying, wall riding for mirror's edge edging, and coasting, which is like doing a manual on a skateboard. The experience has been a mix of frustrations, reset abuse, score triumphs, and feelings of being a badass whenever I would pull off a good flurry of tricks and movement tech within the levels themselves. This is a game about performance and not necessarily content, which is something that early arcade and shmup games also have in common, where they didn't have a lot of content, but they had a lot of room for growth and player skill. And while there is content to go through with both the career mode and the no pressure mode, which is practice basically, the ultimate goal of Street Uni X, or to get to the peak of the experience, is to improve at the art of unicycling, in the same way that you would improve in any other skill that you're passionate about. When you play for progression and content, you'll find yourself in a shallow pond and you're not going to get that much out of this game. But when you play for performance, improvement, and skill, you'll find an expanding river that consumes your playtime as you strive to navigate it better. Playing Street Uni X has also made me reassess my feelings towards other game genres that also exhibit the focus of skill-based performance play, like in precision platformers or shmups, arcades, fighting games, and to an extent even competitive multiplayer games. Now, it does seem like that I'm really stretching here with this, but the point I'm trying to make here is that if you're just playing to try and finish the content, then your experience will ultimately be lessened by the desire to finish the game rather than to just take your time and enjoy the game and strive to improve with it. I have the same issue with the Ollie Ollie games, and it can be a difficult mentality to get out of when you just simply want to finish it and move on with your life. But the best part of these games comes from the evolutionary growth of your play sessions, picking apart and analyzing the available movesets as well as the layouts of the maps themselves and experimenting with the game's mechanics and the physics. Street Uni X's control scheme is simple enough for you to get a rough idea of how to pull off the tricks, but to do the tricks for minutes on end without any breaks in between takes a lot of concentration and practice. And if you approach it from that angle, then you'll be absorbing all of the dynamics available in the game, as well as tapping into the beauty of extreme sports gaming, which is just being in the moment, really getting comfortable with the controls, and experimenting with the flurry of movesets and combos that you can perform, finding ridiculous ways to move about in the field, and just having a blast doing so, even if you mess up. And I did get pissed off at times, yes, sometimes even with what felt like inconsistent input touches with the controls or the agonizing camera system that the game has. But I had been enjoying the gameplay itself so much that my natural desire to get better at the game overrode the parts that I disliked about the game. And there are some things I do personally dislike about it. For starters, the way grinding works. The issue for me is having 2 buttons dedicated to it, and it revolves around your angle and positioning of the character. If you're on the right side and are grinding left, then you have to press the button adjacent to that side, and vice versa when you're on the opposite end. I've played it enough times to memorize this, but I honestly would have preferred it if it was just the 1 button for grinding, and it would just sort of adjust to your position automatically. It would have been a lot easier and more intuitive in my opinion. But also in saying that, it's more than likely a result of taking the unicycle's anatomy into account too. Then there's the camera, and a good camera and a bad camera can make the difference between me continuing to play it and dropping it entirely. Usually it works fine until you realize that you can't fully rotate it. It rotates automatically when you go backwards, and it does it again the moment that you move forward. And I'm someone that doesn't like fixed cameras, and I don't like cameras that I can't completely rotate around in. However, this game's camera system isn't as egregious as something like Jet Set Radio, which had one of the most frustrating camera systems I've ever had the displeasure of using. But sometimes Street Uni X's camera system does rear its ugly head and ends up working against me rather than just letting me cook. In its pursuit of authenticity, it does also take the bad, and it's a pretty common thing in the indie space where, for the sake of authenticity, they will take all of the flaws and issues that people had at the time, back in the 90s and the 2000s, just so that it feels like a game from the 90s and the 2000s. And for me, this isn't always a good thing. And a limited camera system is something that I wasn't necessarily hoping for to come back. Thank God though that the camera can actually keep up with the verticality of this game, since you'll frequently be jumping about getting all those sweet multipliers. And speaking of which, the multipliers here are your best friend, and are generally your best hope of smashing the game's objectives for each of the levels. As I continued playing, I learned quickly that it was better to play for multipliers rather than just points. The more moves I could pull off in quick succession, the higher my total score. This would enable me to clear the final level fairly easy, as I could clear all 3 score requirements within the 2-minute space. And that's also another thing. You have 2 minutes to get things done, which means that if you're still improving and you're still new at the game, more than likely you'll need to reset just to get the rest of the goals. But don't worry, it saves what you've already done. Players that have gotten really good at this game though can clear the whole run in under 5 minutes. So yeah, when I said that there wasn't a lot of content, I wasn't lying, because if you're really good at this game, you can get through each stage very, very quickly. And each stage has their own atmosphere and vibe, scale and space to account for. My personal favorite levels were the downtown and school levels because they had plenty of space to freely move about, and that would just allow you to enjoy the feeling of riding around in a difficult but fascinating vehicle to master. My least favorite was the indoor level. For me, it was just way too claustrophobic and there wasn't much to explore. Some of the letters were in annoying spots that still leads to some mild frustration sometimes. And the other levels like the water treatment plant and the airship were aesthetically pleasing in their own way, but not as enjoyable to ride around in as the downtown and school levels. Each character has their own statistics, showing strengths and weaknesses across the moves that you can perform on a unicycle. So far, I haven't really identified a significant difference in between how each character performs with the moves, and I haven't memorized all of the exact moves yet. But what I do like is how the developer has gone out of their way to not just make characters out of real-life riders, but also include bonus riders that are, well, pretty interesting to say the least. Further incentives beyond just skill are the bonus characters as well as cheats. For example, in the tutorial level, finding these 3 objects will give you a cheat that turns your unicycles into wireframed versions, seeing all of the vertices and edges that went into them. And you complete enough runs with some of the characters, you'll even unlock the wireframe character from the tutorial. As for the selection of music, it's a bundle of indie, punk, and rock music blended together that is reflective of what I'm assuming are the developers' musical tastes, as well as some of the others involved in the project. Tony Hawk's himself did a similar thing with the earlier Tony Hawk's games, where he would base his musical tastes to make up the soundtracks. However, not everyone is going to jive with the tracks here, and we are heading into subjective territory, and this is something I do not even bother debating about. In this game's case, I think it fits the mood and the theme of the game pretty well. And it's always a good thing when one is comfortable in their selection of tracks within their own game. If you don't like the music, then you can just simply turn it off and play your own, and the game will function the same as it did before. You can even play old school RuneScape music and you'll still be styling on one wheel. And that's another thing I like about extreme sports games, is just how personal it feels in comparison to a lot of other sports. A lot of sports that are team-based and follow uniform theme have this uniformity to it that you don't really find in extreme sports, where even the stars that stand out in those sports still have to recognize and support the team effort from time to time. We do remember a lot of the greatest, but the greatest were there because they had a lot of other people helping them along the way. In extreme sports, you do have other people, but ultimately, it's just you and your ride. You're in the moment and you're in your own space, you're doing your own thing, and you are flying your own flag. From this angle, You can pick your own way of riding the unicycle, incorporate your own unique routes on the map, and play whatever music you want. It's a game of expression and athleticism intertwining in a unique way that not a lot of sports games can achieve, because extreme sports boils down to the individual. It's an individual sport and not so much about the jersey on their torso, what position to play, or who they're playing for. Street Uni X and other extreme sports games like it sport for the experience of joy riding and bringing life out of the vehicles through the unique tricks that you can perform in the 7 or so hours of playing. I had seen some growth of my own within this game and know that I could go even further with it if I wanted to. Grinding for more points, getting more overtime even when the 2 minutes is up, or just going into the game with no pressure mode and just vibing out with whatever tracks edge my ears. Finding games that makes you feel like this is like finding best friends in the world. They are very rare, and it's not often that I have something genuinely making me want to come back for more. Like, I can play something, enjoy it, and not really think about it again, but Street Uni X is one of the best titles that came out in 24 and arguably the most underrated. It has some fantastic PS1 aesthetics with faithful rendering techniques and texture mapping with 5th gen energy, fun unicycling gameplay with simple but hard to master trick styling, and some fitting indie music with a punk attitude. It wears Pro Skater on its sleeve and does not apologize for it, taking one of the greatest lineup of games ever created and injecting a new type of vehicle into the mix. Now, to include skateboarding or a BMX would only dilute the mission that this game tries to uphold. But I would like to see a bigger and more ambitious project unfold in the future by the person, specifically for unicycling. My hopes for the next project, if the developer decides it, would be to see something on the same scale as the Tony Hawk's Underground games, which are my personal favorites, or at least something close enough to it. However, with what's already set in stone with this project and the strong nostalgic foundations behind it, there is definitely some room for more features to enrich an already fantastic game. Perhaps some customization to the unicycles could be something to look at, like changing wheel sizes or even just new paint jobs to add a bit more flair to the vehicles. Another neat feature that would pretty much give it infinite content for the content whores is a level editor of sorts. Some of my go-to games have one, and its presence would ensure that it will never run out of stuff to do. Also, maybe something like a mod kit or a source development kit would be nice to see, or at least a tool to inject and replace textures or models, so that I can add this person in the game. Anyways, Street Uni X is a representation of a low poly love letter that reps a community of riders that haven't been represented in the extreme sports genre in the same manner as, well, everything else pretty much, which makes this game unique in its own way. Again, I have yet to find anything else that replicates a pro skater or skate-like experience but with unicycles, and that's precisely why this game was made by the developer. The limited content you have here is quality. The variety of tricks across the characters gives way to nearly countless methods of navigational combo sequencing and fluid unicycle movement. Pulling off a long chain and surviving the landing is always satisfying here. It does have its flaws, no doubt, and its frustrations, where the tricks or the inputs don't always land and the camera being a fucking nuisance at times can sometimes bring the game down a bit. But they were still tolerable enough where I would forget the issues eventually once my groove would return. If you've come from other types of extreme sports games, then you should absolutely check this out, especially if you grew up with the Pro Skater games. I definitely look forward to seeing this game grow, and it's been some time since I've been genuinely excited rather than just merely interested in talking about a particular game. Seriously, go and pick this up. You cannot go wrong with this game, I promise you. And also, for the sake of promoting awesome mods, check out the Thug Pro mod for Tony Hawk's Underground 2. It's a total conversion mod that features levels from Pro Skater 1 all the way up to Project 8, including custom levels and soundtracks, as well as multiplayer, user-created content to keep you busy for pretty much forever. I'll put a link for this in the description for those that need a reason to not leave the house or go to work, or not see the wife. Anyways, Street Uni X is a 2024 indie masterpiece, and I implore you to check it out. Thanks for watching, have a good one.